What up, though? Bureau of Indian Affairs. Certificate of Degree of Indian or Alaska Native Blood Instructions. All portions of the request for a Certificate of Degree of Indian or Alaska Native Blood must be completed. You must show your relationship to an enrolled member of a federally recognized Indian tribe, whether it is through your birth mother or birth father or both. Again, you must show your relationship to an enrolled member of a federally recognized Indian tribe. Now, if tribe truly means family, then what does family mean? Because why would your family need to be federally recognized as a family? Whether it is through your birth mother or birth father or both, a federally recognized Indian tribe means an Indian or Alaska Native tribe, band, nation, pueblo, village, or community which appears on the list of recognized tribes published in the Federal Register by the Secretary of the Interior. So if the Federal Register has the power to say who is a part of your family or tribe, then do they own you? And to what extent? And why is it important to be recognized federally as a family? I'm starting to think that tribe doesn't mean family. Who came up with tribe? Your degree of Indian blood is computed from lineal ancestors of Indian blood who were enrolled with the federally recognized Indian tribe or whose names appear on the designated base rolls of a federally recognized Indian tribe. So is an Indian separate from a federally recognized Indian? Who appointed those who would recognize you? Did you vote? This is from GBH. So, what exactly is blood quantum? By Kat Chow. Kat Chow did this article in February 2018. Kat Chow. Now we go from speaking of Indians to now Native Americans. If you're Native American, there's a good chance that you've thought a lot about blood quantum, a highly controversial measurement of the amount of Indian blood you have. It can affect your identity, your relationships, and whether or not you or your children may become a citizen of your tribe. Now, that's interesting that you would have to become a citizen of your tribe. Is citizen different from member? And again, can we truly now say that tribe is synonymous with family? And what is a family? I think Possibly, these just may be Anglo or anglicized interpretations. Blood quantum was initially a system that the federal government placed onto tribes in an effort to limit their citizenship. The federal government placed onto tribes in order to limit their citizenship. Now, why would the federal government want to limit who was part of your tribe? Who was a citizen of a tribe? Why? Perhaps it has to do with something monetarily, finances. If someone's taking care of you, they have the right to limit the amount of people who they're going to be taking care of. Many native nations, including the Navajo, now think about this. If the Native Americans are the true people of this soil, and we hear it all the time, how the Anglo-Saxon did them, how the Anglo-Saxon nearly exterminated them, then why would you get into bed with the very people who wanted to wipe you off the face of the planet? Many native nations, including the Navajo Nation and the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians, still use it as part of their citizenship requirements. Blood quantum minimums really restrict who can be a citizen of a tribe. If you've got 25% of Navajo blood according to that tribe's blood quantum standards, and you have children with someone who has a lower blood quantum, and you have children with someone who has a lower blood quantum, those kids won't be able to enroll. These are businesses. These tribes, hey, just from what we've went over so far, tribes seem to be synonymous with company or corporation. Blood quantum simply is the amount of Indian blood that an individual possesses. The federal government, and specifically the Department of the Interior, issues what is called a certified degree of Indian blood. The Department of the Interior, the federal government, and specifically the Department of Interior. So now you have effectively Anglo-Saxons, the very people who Native Americans claim did everything they could to exterminate the Native Americans, the very people who did these horrible things, these, quote, horrible things, end quote. Now, these are the very people who are issuing what is called a certified degree of Indian blood. And that is a card similar to an ID card. So the way that blood quantum is calculated is by using tribal documents, and usually it's a tribal official or a government official that calculates it. But really, it's a mathematical equation. So the quantum is a fraction of blood that is derived going back to the original enrollees of a tribe who were counted on census rolls. So the quantum is a fraction of blood that is derived going back, not going back to your 8 great grandparents or your 16 second grades or your 32 third grades or your 64 fourth grades. No, it's going back to the original enrollees of a tribe who were counted on census rolls. Mind you, those people, in order to be counted, they had to meet certain criteria. You would think that the only criteria a quote indigenous person end quote would have to meet is that they're indigenous, right? And then their blood quantum was documented, and usually those original enrollees had a full blood quantum, typically. How did people know that those original enrollees had full blood quantum? Well, they didn't. And that's that one of the major problems with blood quantum today is that a lot of times the people taking the roles were federal government officials who were unfamiliar with native ways of establishing and defining their own communities. Who are black individuals who were living as fully incorporated members of Indian tribes? And when these original roles were taken, oftentimes these freedmen were not included, even though those individuals may be of mixed heritage, black and Indian. There is no such thing as a black human. Remember that. Black and Indian, these are American Indians. These are Americans. So no need to distinguish. Because of their black appearance, no such thing as a black human. They mean what they properly mean is their brown appearance. They were listed on a separate roll. And today, the ramification is that they do not have that original enrollee in their past, all by design. They have to keep the lie alive. And there have been many things put in place in order to remove your family, your people, I should say, from their soil portion and the soil they sprouted up from. They do not have enough blood quantum and therefore oftentimes cannot be extended tribal membership. Can you talk to me about how the concept of blood quantum came to be used for native tribes? Native just means you were born here. Certainly, American Indians have been racialized. You hear that? Can you talk to me about how the concept of blood quantum came to be used for native tribes? And then she answered, certainly, American Indians have been racialized. The one who's asking the question didn't ask her about American Indians. They asked her about native tribes, right? The tribes of people who were born here. They didn't ask her about the original people of this soil, the American Indians. She answered, American Indians have been racialized, but our primary identity continues to be a political one. Blood quantum really emerges as a way to trace race between generations of native people starting at the turn of the 20th century, starting in 1900. This started in 1900. So we aren't talking about the people who are truly from this soil and are the people of this soil we call America. We're talking about people who started in 1900, the early 1900s. And again, I think it's helpful to understand the way that blood quantum works through another example that people may be more familiar with, and that's the one drop rule. The one drop rule measured the amount of black blood. No such thing as a black human. So who are they speaking of? They're speaking of brown people. That not the brown people that you call the people who you term as Mexicans today, Chinos, Romans, the Anglo-Saxon, the anglicized people, not the indigenous people of that place we term as Mexico today, because we know how those people look. We know that those people, the indigenous people of the place we term as Mexico, the original people of that place, I'm not saying they were all the same complexion, but all you have to do is, if you don't go there, look it up and see how those people look. Those are the people who you don't see on TV. You don't see those people on TV. As a matter of fact, a lot of times on TV, when you speak of um, the place we term as Mexico, Central America, South America, oftentimes you see lighter skinned, lighter complexioned people, more, not even tawny, but I would say more like French vanilla people. The one drop rule is the one drop rule measured the amount of black blood that black people had in society. There is no such thing as black people. We're talking brown people. And again, not the people who the people who you see term as Mexican and you call them brown people. Even they call themselves brown. And most of the time they're not brown. Have you got that as well? We we call, and I've heard people say this. They'll say, you know, us blacks and those brown people, when in fact the person calling themselves black, they're brown. And the people who they're terming as brown are nowhere near brown. We all, probably colored as children. We all learned our colors, right? And we seem to, the people seem to forget those colors as they become adults. The one drop rule measured the amount of brown blood that brown people had in society. And we're speaking of Americans, American Indians. We're speaking of the people who they term as Negro or Negroid. And because when we hear the term black, it's not just talking about people who are dark brown. We're talking about features. We're talking about attitude, countenance. And that ensured that every person who had at least one drop would be considered black or brown and would be covered under these discriminatory laws and, even in the earlier days, enslaved. Blood quantum emerged as a way to measure Indianness through a construct of race, so that over time, Indians would literally breed themselves out and rid the federal government of their legal duties to uphold treaty obligations. One of the questions that kept coming up is, okay, so why don't tribes just ditch these blood quantum requirements and switch to an enrollment requirement that uses lineal descent? Lineal descent basically means that if your ancestors were enrolled in a tribe, you can be too. So the question remains. The answer, that is the question of the century. And first, I want to be clear that I don't intend to speak on behalf of any specific tribes or even on behalf of my own. Oh, so the person speaking, I believe is it Chow? Who, anyway. but I'm happy to walk you through some of those arguments that exist in support of maintaining blood quantum requirements for tribal membership. The thing that I found to be most interesting, so blood quantum is a way used. It's a sort of, it's a sort of, blood quantum is a sort of resume, I guess. Um, it's a resume when you're trying to become a part of this particular company. The thing that I found to be most interesting about both arguments in support and against blood quantum requirements is the language of survival. So, lineal descendant supporters think about high memberships through the lens of existence as a resistance right. And so there's a desire to build up tribes' numbers and capacity in order to survive and perpetuate the tribe. On the other side, those who defend blood quantum requirements also evoke this language of survival. And they look upon those blood quantum minimums as a way to preserve an already existing closed community that's very close and usually very culturally connected. If each tribe is able to determine their own enrollment requirements, are there any tribes out there that you've heard of that are deciding to forego lineal descent and blood quantum and deciding to use another completely different method? I have heard of one example in Canada where a First Nation has decided to open enrollment to people who have no Indian ancestry at all, meaning that those individuals don't meet the federal Canadian requirements of being a status Indian, quote, status Indian, end quote. And they also don't have that blood quantum or descendancy from an original enrollee. It's an extremely progressive and interesting move, and they're really changing the game. See these words? I'm not getting family vibes here. You hear me? Okay? I'm not getting nation vibes from this. I'm getting business. Think about this. Enrollment, federal, status Indian, blood quantum, enrollee, game. This is from the DNA test. The history of DNA testing from discovery to modern applications. The history of DNA testing from discovery to modern applications by Andres Kovacs. The DNAtest.com. The history of DNA testing dates back to the 1980s, when the technique of DNA fingerprinting was first developed by Dr. Alec Jeffreys at the University of Leicester or Leicester or Leicester. The history of DNA testing dates back to the 1980s. I didn't say it dates back to the 1880s, to the 1780s, to the 1680s. The history of DNA testing. Do you hear this? Do you hear this? Sometimes it's okay to believe your ears, to believe your eyes, to believe your natural senses. I mean, that's why you have them. The history of DNA testing dates back to the 1980s, when the technique of DNA fingerprinting was first developed by Dr. Alec Jeffreys at the University of Leicester or Leicester. The roots of DNA testing can be traced back to the discovery of DNA itself in 1953 by James Watson and Francis Crick. The roots of DNA testing from the 1980s can be traced back to the discovery of DNA itself. They didn't say from the discovery of humans. They didn't say from the discovery of the American Indian. They said from the discovery to the discovery of DNA itself in 1953 by James Watson and Francis Crick. Do the right thing.